Well, hello there, and welcome to a playoff edition of the Buckeye Fever podcast. I am your host, Dave Holmes. It is time to drink those Alabama Crimson tears. All right, we're going to talk all about Ohio State and Tennessee in just a few minutes, but this really is the talking point. Alabama against SMU. And it doesn't matter, when March Madness had 64 teams, the debate was 65. When the college football playoff had 4 teams, the debate was number 5. And here we are at 12. We're going to cry about 13. My thoughts on Alabama. Stop. Stop. You have absolutely no reason to be upset. None. And the whole narrative, and I heard Nick Saban say it, and I know folks down in Alabama, they've been saying it too. What motivation is there for us to ever schedule a good team ever again if all that matters is your record? Fellas, you played Western Kentucky, South Florida, Wisconsin, and Mercer. Lord have Mercer. Western Kentucky, South Florida, Wisconsin, and Mercer. That was your non-conference. Oh, we have no motivation to schedule anyone ever again. Yeah, that's who you schedule. Let's not get it confused. The SEC is a good conference. Historically, it's been the best conference. This year, not so sure about that. But okay, so let's quit acting like it's who you scheduled. You played Mercer and Western Kentucky and South Florida. Stop. This has nothing to do with who you scheduled. Now, your strength of schedule is better than SMU. No question about it. You played a harder conference schedule than SMU did. No doubt. But you know what? You lost to 6-6 Vanderbilt. You lost to 6-6 Oklahoma, and didn't just lose, you got throttled by the Sooners late in the season. So you don't have this we're peaking at the right time argument. You don't have this we don't have any bad losses argument. You lost 3 games, and 2 of them were bad. Now, Ohio State fans can remember seasons like this back when it was a 4-team playoff, when Urban Meyer's team got boat raced in West Lafayette against Purdue that one night. One bad game all season. And guess what? The Buckeyes were left out of the playoff. And you know what? No reason to cry. It is always in your hands. And the moment you take it out of your hands, it's now in the committee's hands, and you can't get mad about what happens. You know who slept great on Saturday night? The Oregon Ducks. They slept like babies because they took care of everything. Ohio State was 10-2, and we knew they'd get in the playoff. But you know what? When you lose that game to Michigan, you take certain things out of your hands. The Buckeyes got a really brutal draw. Arguably the hardest draw in the whole field. But you know what? That's what you get when you lose as a 20-point favorite on your home field. When you take things out of your hands, you put it in the committee's hands. And for some reason, Alabama doesn't get this, which blows my mind, because if there's one thing the state of Alabama is known for collectively, it would be intelligence. And you guys are laughing. But out in Alabama, they don't get the sarcasm on that joke, so I can get away with that joke. But come on, Alabama. You can't lose to 6-6 Vandy, get killed by 6-6 Oklahoma, schedule Western Kentucky, South Florida, Mercer, and then whine when 9-3 doesn't get the job done. I've heard the argument, well, Dave, who do you actually think is better? You don't actually believe SMU's better than Alabama, do you? And the answer is, I don't know. Now, my hunch, which is going to be slanted by 100 years of historical data, would say Alabama is probably better than SMU. But you know what? Alabama had a chance to prove it when they lost to Vandy and lost to Oklahoma and lost to Tennessee. Is SMU worse than Alabama? Maybe. Crimson Tide fans would say, well, if you believe that, we belong in the field. But here's the thing. Michigan was worse than Ohio State, probably, right? And the Buckeyes lose as a 20-point favorite. I don't think people actually believe that Michigan was a better team this year than Ohio State, but they punched him in the mouth when it mattered most, and they deserved to win the game. Remember when Boise State played Oklahoma in the Fiesta Bowl? I don't think anyone believed that Boise State was a better team, but they won the game. That's Alabama's case. Come on, you really think we're worse than SMU? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But you know what? You were better than Vanderbilt, and you lost to them. You were better than Oklahoma, and you lost to them. So at some point, Bama has to shut up about their reputation and prove it on the field. If you are clearly better than SMU, you had 12 games to prove it. You took it out of your hands and you put it in the committee's hands. Is Alabama better than SMU? I would say 65-35, I lean toward yes. But I think that's more of a talent issue than a better team because they had a chance to prove it and they lost 3 games. So spare me no more Alabama Crimson tears. I'm done with it. Now, I'm going to do a little whining of my own here about the seeding of this bracket. I think it's stupid. And I think they're going to tweak it moving forward. And I'm going to cry on behalf of the Oregon Ducks because I think the Oregon Ducks got absolutely hosed for being the only undefeated team in this field. They get the winner of Ohio State and Tennessee, which are arguably, 2 of the top 5 most talented teams in this entire tournament. So the Ducks get hosed. And you have a scenario like the 5 seed Texas Longhorns. They play Clemson and then would get Arizona State. 6 seed Penn State gets SMU and then potentially Boise. So any system in which the 5 and the 6 seed has an easier draw than the 1 seed is severely flawed. So I think they need to take a look at this and fix it. The way I fix it moving forward is if you win your conference title, you get an automatic bid. You do not get an automatic bye. I think that was asinine. I think that's stupid. I think it's an overreach. We want to make conference titles mean something, so we made them mean too much. Typical societal overcorrection, right? We want these conference titles to mean something. Great, let's give Arizona State a bye. What? If they lose that game, they're not even in the bracket. Same with Boise, quite possibly. It should not be that big of a swing. You win your conference title, you get a bye, you lose, you're not even in the field. That's too big of a swing. So fix that moving forward. Apologies to the Oregon Ducks. Hopefully we get you again in round 2 in the Rose Bowl. Coming up next on the Buckeye Fever podcast, we're talking about that game, the Buckeyes against the Volunteers. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Buckeye Fever podcast. All right, Ohio State against Tennessee under the lights on a Saturday night, 8 p.m. kickoff. Finally, the Buckeyes don't play a game at noon. Now, it is too early to know the forecast. Even with our exceptional technology at ABC6, we're not confident we can project the forecast 2 weeks out. We would be wizards if we could do that. But I do think in Columbus, Ohio, at 8 p.m., December 21st, probably going to be cold. The question is that a good thing for this Buckeye football team? Because the whole allure of this playoff has always been these Southern guys. Oh, these Southern fellas can't come up here and play in the cold with us Yankees. The Southern guys can't come up here and play in the cold. Well, here's the thing. Look at Ohio State against Michigan in the cold and the wind. I could make a case that this Buckeye team is not exactly built for the elements either, on some level. Tennessee has a great defensive line and a great running back, Dylan Sampson. 1,600-plus total yards, 22 touchdowns. Arguably the most dynamic running back in the SEC. And I was talking to Jay Richardson, who is former national champion, former NFL player, our great analyst on the Football Fever on ABC6. And I said, who does this Tennessee team remind you of? And he said, Dave, you don't want the answer to that because it's Michigan. Jay Rich said, these are the Michigan Wolverines wearing orange. Now, psychologically, I just think the Buckeyes would rather see orange than blue. I do think there's a mental hurdle for the Buckeyes with Michigan. We talked about that on last week's show. But it does concern me because the number one thing the Buckeyes are worried about is their offensive line. And Tennessee's defensive line could wreck this game for them. That, to me, is by far the most important matchup. Ryan Day has said he's going to rework the offensive line. What that means remains to be seen. We don't know what exactly that is, but we know it's not going to be the same offensive line we saw against Michigan. Different players, different positions. Kirk Herbstreit's under a lot of fire for a comment he made on the bracket show. Herbie said he thinks maybe it would have been better for Ohio State to have a road game to get away from the shoe because fans are going to be booing on a 3 and out. They're going to be booing for Ryan Day, calling for his head during the game. And Herbie's under a lot of fire for that in Columbus. I think I understand the sentiment Because if you were there at Michigan, or even like Nebraska, that game was close down the stretch. The Shoe is an interesting place because when the Buckeyes are winning, it is rocking like few places in America. But there is this uneasy feeling, like that Nebraska game specifically, where it was like when the Buckeyes would have to punt, you would sense a 100,000 person groan. I get what Herbie was trying to say, is coming off the Michigan loss at home, do you want to just get away? Maybe, but you still would rather play at home. You don't want to go down there and let their 100,000 people, all right? Tennessee has 3,500 tickets allotted for them. Ohio State's going to get the other 100,000. I still think you want to play at home. So I disagree with Herbie, but I do understand the sentiment he was trying to get at. I get it. The other thing about this game, quite often after a loss, you hear teams say, we want to play right away. We want to get out there and play right away. This is one time where you don't. I think it really helps the Buckeyes that they have a 3-week break between Michigan and this playoff game. Because I don't think you can repair what was broken in the brains of the Buckeyes in 7 days. I think that Ohio State locker room after the game was the most unpleasant locker room maybe they've ever seen at Ohio Stadium. It sounds like it was pretty intense in the locker room after the game. I think the Buckeyes needed some time to get away, to heal up mentally, and regroup. And as I said last week, this is the hardest job of Ryan Day's career, to get this team to forget about arguably the worst loss, at least the worst loss of this millennium. Maybe we can go back to mid-90s against Michigan. But the worst loss in a long time. Can you get them to move on from that? And I think it takes time, and I think it's good that the Buckeyes have a few weeks here to get back to routine and get ready for Tennessee. Looking forward to it, though. It's the kind of matchup we always wanted. The SEC coming north, a primetime game at the Shoe, should be great. We're going to talk more about it next week, but that'll do it for us on this week's Buckeye Fever podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, and if you know someone from Alabama, give them a hug this week. They need it. We'll see you back here next week.